So, Lushana Tova, it's Happy New Year. These are the 10 days of awe between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Our Jewish friends are observing the holiest days of their year, the new year, 5,778, marking a different way of marking time, a Jewish way of marking time, and we reverence that time with them, along with them, out of respect for our neighbors. Also, because Jesus was a Jew, and that is the origin of our religion. So when I say Happy New Year, L'Shana Tova, it's a way of respecting our own origins. It's also a way of respecting our neighbors. It's a way of saying happy birthday to the world, because one of the beliefs with that is that it is 5,778 years since the beginning of the creation of the world. It's nice to be able to mark it that precisely. There was a Christian evangelist who predicted that the world would end yesterday. Who's still here? It didn't end. We're still here. So we say, happy birthday world, 5,778. You're looking good, even with some problems. And also it is happy birthday to MCC Boston, 45 years. Things have changed in the 45 years since MCC Boston began. I did a little gay Boston research to find out what was gay Boston like in the 1970s. And this is very, very sketchy, I know. I was living in New York in the 1970s. I actually was living in Detroit. That's where I grew up. And I came out in the summer of 1976. That was my coming out summer, right after high school. But I did then move right to New York City, where I went to college. But Boston in the 1970s, the first gay pride march was in 1971 here in Boston, the first gay pride in Boston. And the bars were Jacques, the Saint, the other side. I don't know if anyone was there. Wait, I saw you there. Just kidding. I wasn't pointing at anybody. I was just making that up. Some of there was a bookstore, and I've just lost the name of it. Who remembers? Was it Glad Day? What was the name of the bookstore here? Glad Day? Yep. The newspaper was Gay Community News. Some of the challenges. Oh, Elaine Noble was elected as one of the first openly gay legislators in the entire country. I think that was in 1974. And some of the challenges. In 1978, at the Boston Public Library, 100 men were arrested for what was called lewd behavior. They were cruising. And a gay activist political group, a legal group called Gay Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, GLAD, was founded right here at Old West Church by an attorney named John Ward. So some of you may remember these days, I don't know. It's a very different time, and that was the zeitgeist into which MCC Boston was founded 45 years ago. Very different time. So happy birthday, MCC Boston. Things have changed. Times have changed. I know that from my own experience of coming out and being gay in that time, it was a time when gay men and lesbians did very little together, except on large occasions, like Gay Pride Day. Then we would come together, but mostly we were separate. And that wasn't a bad thing. Sometimes you have to find out who you are by spending time in separate spaces in order to find out who you are, so that when you come together, you can be who you are. Separatism was not a bad word. We were proud of our separate spaces. It was in the 80s that we learned a different way of being together, and we can't have an anniversary without acknowledging this, that in the 1980s, lesbians stepped up to help take care of gay men who had HIV and AIDS. And I just want to say that it was valorous behavior. And gay men haven't always yet paid the debt for that behavior by showing the same kind of solidarity around women's health issues as lesbians showed for gay men. But it wasn't just showing up, it was stepping across a chasm too. So I just want to acknowledge that on this 45th anniversary. And the church was one of the few places where lesbians and gay men spent time together. So that was a very different time. Feminism was an important part of Metropolitan Community Church identity. We weren't just a gay church, we were a feminist church, and that was really important in the identity of MCC Boston and most of the churches in the Northeast District of MCC. Karen Ziegler talked a little bit about that last week as part of our heritage, and I wanted to say it again this week. And one of our defining conversations was, are we a gay church first? And then also, are we a feminist church first? And then we try to find how Christianity applies to us in that regard. Or are we a Christian church first? And then we see how gay and feminist fits into that. And in our churches in the Northeast and in some of the California churches, not surprisingly, it was San Francisco, Boston. You've got to love that connection. We said, we are who we are first. Feminist, gay, lesbian, those were our primary identities at that time. And then we'll look at how received patriarchal Christianity fits us, secondly. And then in other places in MCC, it was more, well, we're Christian first, and then we'll see how these other things work. The truth is, we were working out a lot of stuff, and it was all important. All of it was important. And we were asking questions outside the church that people who were staying with the church didn't have the freedom to ask. In a sense, we were separatists. All of us, we were religious separatists. We had to leave the church in order to find out things about spirituality and religion that was liberating, that people who were staying in the church couldn't ask. They were trying to change it from within. We said, we're tired of that. We've had it with that. I'm not saying one was better than the other. They were just different paths. Some people had different tolerance levels. That was part of it. If you were an MCC in the 70s, you just really didn't have a tolerance for trying to change it from the inside. And I was one of those people, and MCC Boston was one of those churches, and all the MCCs were like that. So we made a contribution, I think, by working for change from the outside that was just as important, maybe more important. Well, I hate to rank these things, but I'm among family, so I'm going to say this. Maybe more important than the people who stayed in the center. Who knows how change is made? The truth is, you need people working from within, and you need people working on the outside. And over time, change takes place. Today, I think this is true to say, there would not be as many people at home in the mainline churches, I hate that expression, but they would not have the place in the mainline churches if it weren't for all the ways that MCC people worked outside the church. We have something we can take credit for. All these open and affirming churches, a rainbow flag on every corner. My own ability to work as an openly gay person in the United Church of Christ, and Robert too. We wouldn't have that if it hadn't been not only for the people working from within, but also the people working on the margins. So MCC Boston, take a bow, not only for what we achieved outside the church, but the ways we changed church for everybody, and I think for the better. Jesus' words in the gospel tonight, the words where he said, "So the last will be first, and the first will be last," were words that have puzzled Christians for 2,000 years. They've irritated Christians, they've puzzled Christians, they've comforted Christians. And I think that those words that he says in this gospel for today, the last will be first, and the first will be last, are words that were a promise to us then, because we were the last 45 years ago in churchland. But also they're a challenge to us today when we say, and the first will be last, because they speak to us. We who have received grace now have an obligation to be bestowers of grace to others. And that's what I want to talk about. I said I would talk a little bit about the past tonight and the present, but I really want the basis of what I leave you with, at least, to be about our future. It sounds a little audacious to say I'm going to talk about the future of the movement, like I have any basis to do that. But I do. We've spent the whole month talking about our anniversary. And I do want to appreciate our history. But, you know, in this business, the church business, like life, you're only as good as your last success. And we have to not only appreciate where we've been, but really we have to be praying about, thinking about, dreaming about, hoping for, where are we going next? And I'm just going to lay this out here. I've been coming to church here for a year and a month, 2 months, since I moved to Boston. I am deeply committed to the United Church of Christ, where I have become a minister because I believe that's part of what we're here to do. As a gay person, an openly gay person in ministry, I want to be sure now that I step into the world that I helped create. It's been hard for me to leave my gay, comfortably, mostly gay world. I was kind of afraid to do it, to tell you the truth. I didn't mind training students to go out and do it, but I wasn't sure I wanted to do it myself. I'm deeply committed to that work, but I also have been very grateful to have this place on Sunday nights to come, where I'm with my LGBTQIA community too, because I still need a place where I feel at home. And I'm not alone in that. I believe in MCC Boston, its past, its present, and its future. And I come here and I work as a volunteer like many of you, because I don't think it's done yet. This anniversary is not a funeral. This anniversary is about our future, and I hope you believe that too. I come here because I believe this church, in some form or other, I don't even mean the building, but this is what this helps me pray about it. I think it should be full on Sunday night. I do. I pray about it. I pray about this church in my prayers every night. And I pray visualizing, remember I'm from California, so we do stuff like this, visualizing this church full and the Spirit alive, which I do feel it every Sunday. But you know what I'm talking about? I mean just vibrant. I mean vibrant, buzzing, alive. And the people like me who need a touch of what I come here for, all over the Boston area, thronging the place to get what they can only find in a setting like this when they need it. Because we have an open table. And because we still preach what Jesus said, the last shall be first and the first will be last. And sometimes you need to be comforted by those words. And sometimes you need to be challenged by them. And sometimes you need to hear it in the dialect that we speak here, the dialect of queer. Now, Jesus talks about people coming to work in a vineyard. Some come at 9 o'clock in the morning. Some come at noon. Some come at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Some come at 5 o'clock. And some people, and they all get the same reward, the reward of grace. They get what they need. They get their hearts filled and their spirits filled by the vineyard owner. And some people, observing, who came at 9 in the morning, are a little upset about that when they see the people who came at 5 in the evening getting the same thing. And you know, I remember the days and I think it's still true, when certain kinds of Christians, observing gay people coming to the Lord's table in the 1970s and the 1980s and the 1990s, would be very judgmental, and they'd be saying, we do Christianity right. Who are these other people coming to the Lord's table and receiving the same bountiful grace that we receive when we observe everything in this book correctly? Who are these newcomers getting the same thing, the same blessing? And I know that Jesus would say to them, though they couldn't always hear it, what's your problem? Are you upset because I'm generous? Because I welcome other people that are different from you, who come at a different time, in a different way? Don't you receive my bountiful love? I do think that half, 3/4, 90% of what most people resented about gay people, LGBTQ people, receiving God's grace through places like MCC and others, it wasn't about how we read Leviticus or Deuteronomy or other things. I think they were kind of jealous somehow. They didn't understand it. It wasn't about how you read a Hebrew word or a Greek word. They were somehow jealous. I can't prove that to you, but when it came right down to it, they saw us coming and getting the same blessing and felt somehow that it was taking away from what they were receiving. That's why I always love this gospel, because I think it was for us, in a way. It was saying to us, don't worry. Doesn't matter how you got here. You're here now, and you're getting God's grace and God's blessing, the same blessing. Don't worry about other people. Don't worry what they're saying. Don't listen to them. You're getting the blessing. Just as God was saying to them, chill out. You are getting what you need. Don't worry about what other people are getting. All right? The last shall be first, and the first shall be last. Jesus was speaking to them then. Now Jesus is speaking to us and saying, and I say this as an experienced pastor, every church I've ever worked in, there's always a little bit of this. When did the church start? Well, 1970, 1980. Work at an old Congregational church now, when the Pilgrims came over. No, people think it started when they started going there, right? Didn't matter when it started. The Sunday I came, that's when this church started. Actually, it doesn't matter when it started. Who's here now? It doesn't matter if you came at 9 in the morning or noon or 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock. Who's here now? We're here now. It's up to us. We who received the grace and are receiving it, it's up to us to become the people who make sure others receive it. We can't become proprietary about it. We have to be willing to give it away promiscuously, the way God gives it away, indiscriminately, generously, lavishly, extravagantly, abundantly. Give it away. The one thing about grace, if you hoard it, it withers. If you give it away, it multiplies. That's part of what God's saying to us at MCC Boston, I think. And what Cody is saying in this book is, we need to learn new ways of speaking and adapting. You know, it doesn't matter. I love my gay ways, my 1970s gay ways, my ways of being gay. The young people don't care. They don't care. They're not interested. You know, I've got great pictures, Folsom Fair weekend in San Francisco. That's what we call the holy days in San Francisco, okay? Those are the high holy days. They happen at the same time of year. I've got my pictures of me in my chaps and my vest and my harness and all that. The young people don't care about this. I'm speaking plainly and flippantly to make a point. we who are of an age, of a certain age, which is older than many of them, need to learn LBTGQIIA, if that's what they speak. And it's okay if we learn it inexpertly, but we need to be listening and not be silent. We need to try. Give up what we need to give up, just like people did for us. Okay? The people who are coming at 5 o'clock deserve what we got at 9 o'clock in the morning. Even if it means giving up something that's dear to us, we still have our memories, right? And we still have ways of preserving it. Grace has to be given away. We who received it have to be willing to give it away. That's how we give back to the universe. There's another way that these stories speak to us too. We who are LGBTQIA. It's not just about gay anymore. Who can read this story and not think about immigration? I mean this. Who can hear this gospel and not hear about it? I say this as a person who comes from, who has grandparents from Poland and Quebec and Ireland, parents and grandparents with, shall we say, not a lot of papers. You know, I think it would come as a shock to some of my relatives, and they might even end up seeing this, but that a baptismal certificate is not the same as a green card, okay? Because in my family history, some people think baptismal certificates are like legal documents that you can use to prove immigration. Well, that's because that's what they had, but they're not. Families come different ways to this country, and they're not all legal. But boy, they can be super judgmental about people who come other ways. Some came at 9 a.m., some came at noon, some came at 3 p.m., some came with papers, and some did not. But if you're here now, you deserve the same grace. I know I just got a little political. I know you're shocked. You've heard me preach before. But there's a principle at work here that Jesus is inviting us to. If you received grace, ever, once in your life, even once, what's the best way to show it? Give it away, give it back, bestow it. I'm going to close with one story about this to challenge us. Got a billion, but I'm going to use this one. Last night, I went to Out Metro West banquet in Needham, as I tweeted from the banquet, because not all the gay people live in Boston. So Out Metro West is the GLBT social service agency, mostly for youth and young adult programs in the western suburbs, okay? And we got to hear, as a speaker, Dr. Asa Sevilius. So Dr. Sevilius is a transgender principal, the second in the country, at the Heath School in Brookline. And Dr. Sevilius told us about his journey, which was itself moving. But here's the thing that is about: what do we do when we are recipients of grace? What do we do with it, right? He told us about the story of Ruby Bridges. Some of you will know this story. Ruby Bridges was a 6-year-old African-American girl in New Orleans in 1960. She was the very first, actually, African-American girl to go to an integrated public school in the South. 6 years old. And her parents decided to allow her to do this. Her first day of school in 1960, she went. There was she had to be escorted with police and military to a crowd. She said later she thought it was Mardi Gras. And when she got into the school, all the parents took all the white students out of the school. So she was the only child in the school building. On the third day, the parents returned the children, but she spent her whole first year in a classroom by herself. Barbara Henry was her school teacher, a white woman from Boston. There's a Boston connection. Imagine, first grader in a classroom by herself at that age. So her school teacher was interviewed recently in the Boston Globe. She said she never forgot it. She was her music teacher, her gym teacher. They did pretend jump rope. But Dr. Asa Sebelius, this transgender principal, last night described the impact just of hearing about this story as a child and then becoming a principal, and why he decided to be open about being transgender, and the pledge that he made to the students last night, and that he makes to his students at the school in Brookline. He said he's always wondered, where was the principal during all this? How does a principal allow this to happen? He said, I'm not going to be that principal. And he made this pledge to the students. I will always have your back. MCC Boston. We who have received grace for 45 years, whose back are we going to have to show ourselves and to the world that we are grateful for the grace we have received? That's how our church is going to fill up, by showing whose back we have. Could be our transgender friends, more and more. It could be taking the knee to stand against racism. It could be those who came at 5 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock around immigration. I don't even know, but here's what I know. God loves us so much that God gathered this church and churches like it so that we would not live lives of despair or degradation. I went back to a classical source with a quote I want to leave you with. Remember Rita Mae Brown? She was a lesbian feminist writer from the 70s and 60s, actually. She wrote a novel called Ruby Fruit Jungle. Some of you will remember it, some not. She also was a member of the Furies Collective, a Marxist feminist, I love saying that, Marxist feminist collective. She wrote a book called The Plain Brown Wrapper. And she said this about love, because I think this is God's love for us. Love is the enemy of unequal social structure. When people really love, they become disobedient. MCC Boston, time for us to become disobedient. I don't mean uncivil, but I do mean disobedient in the sense that we have to start showing the world that we care more about people than we do about rules. Church rules, government rules. I'm not saying everyone needs to get arrested tomorrow, but that spirit is what built MCC Boston and churches like it. God loved us so much that God gave us this church. It's time for us to start giving it away again. Amen.